Hello, I'm Mike Craddock, and today I'm going to show you how to change the standard kit grease in the diff of a NEO 3, or it could be an MP9 TKO4 ready set, to KYOSHO silicone oil. In the front I'm going to use 5000, in the centre I'm going to use 6000, and in the rear I'm going to use a 3000 diff oil. This will help keep your diffs well balanced and make it a lot easier to drive, and it'll just help you all over, and you'll have a longer lasting diff. So I'm going to show you with a few tools. You'll need a Phillips screwdriver, a slightly bigger one, a smaller Phillips screwdriver, a pair of good set of needle nose pliers, a small screwdriver to get some small parts out of the diff gears, and some grease to grease the diff cups and the ring gear. So we'll start with the disassembly of the car to get the differential out. So I'll take the body off first, it's always easier. I've got myself a little parts tray here just to keep the screws and that in. I've cheated a little bit, electric screwdriver. This is quite handy for getting the screws out of the bottom of the gearbox because they're quite stiff, but a normal screwdriver is okay. So if you just loosen the screws off the top of the shocks first, get these off. You just pop the shocks off, they just push off after you take the retaining screw off. And you will need to undo the bumper screw and the two screws here underneath the gearbox. So I'll get the big screwdriver on there. Bumper screw out, again this bumper should pull off now, like so. This is the rest of the gearbox. So you undo these two screws here, quite well done up, and then your two gearbox ones. So remove the two bottom screws, holding your suspension plate holder on, and your two top ones, your gearbox. You'll see the two pins here, they hold the wishbones to the axles. So if you just pull them out, there's no thread on them or anything like that. Put them in the parts tray, do the other side. So you'll see there's your suspension holder and your other pin. Then you're ready to pull your gearbox off. This will slot off and this will expose the diff. The diff's well greased, and you'll see the UJs in there, and this is why we take the shocks out. It makes it easier to take your diff out because the shocks will be in the way. Then you're ready to dismantle the diff. There's a little shim on the gearbox there. This pushes the gear so it works tighter to the pinion gear, and it's most important that you check that from time to time so that it keeps a nice mesh, so that the gears stay tight so they don't slip or jump, and then otherwise they will break the gears. With this diff, it will be the front diff and the rear diff do exactly the same. So I wipe off the grease, shim off and break the seal, and then I cheat with the electric screwdriver and open up the case, and you can see that you've got your pin there. Take your pin off, this is where the pliers come in handy, and then you can take the thing out, and this is where you need to grease the diff gear when you replace back. I'll show you this, and this is your seal, and this keeps the oil in instead of when we're using grease, so it's a good diff really. And this is your gasket as well. So remove all them parts, and there's your gear disassembled. You remove the big gear and then the two small planet gears, small grub screw on here. So you need a 2mm Allen driver. Just undo that, give it a bash and it will fall out, and then you will see the pin. You won't be able to get the pin out unless you line it up with the small screw hole. So I've just done, so you can see that in there, push that out of the hole, and you can see that halfway out there. Just get your pliers again on the other side and you pull your pin out. This will release the other drive cup. Again, it has the recess there, cut out where the grease sits. If you put some nice lot of grease in there, this will protect diff cups from wearing. Take your bearing off with your other bearing. You can oil these as well, make sure they roll nice and freely. I use a baby wipe. Baby wipe's very good for cleaning up the diff gears. So you can clean all the gears up, just wipe them all clean. You notice there's some little shim washers, be careful you don't lose these. Make sure they stay with the gears. You should have one on the other side. There you go, there's the other one, so keep that on with that one. You don't really need to take this off of the pins. With the grease on the inside of that, if you get your screwdriver, you can scrape a lot of the grease out. Just wipe it on the cloth. There's There's a few spaces in here to take out. Obviously when this diff will be taken apart, there you will find that the grease is mostly gone after about 1 hour of using your brand new kit. So this is why the silicone oil will last a lot longer and doesn't deteriorate like the grease will, and the grease gets hot and dries out, so you'll end up with a nice black mess in here. So you need to clean it out to keep your diffs running in good working order. So once you've done that, you get your ring gear grease, which you can buy from your KYOSHO dealer. You get your screwdriver, and in the groove you wipe the grease on, and then you can wipe it off a bit. Better to use too much than not enough. And then I go on the inside, just put it on the inside first, just spin it round, and then on this side as well, just to make sure you put all the grease around. And you can see the grease now sitting in the groove. This is what it's designed for, to hold it in so that it keeps the diff cup shaft and the diff from wearing these two away. Push your bearing back on. So you've got your bearing back on now. Push that. Then you line the hole up of your diff cup there. Put your O-ring on. Make sure that sits nicely in the cutout. Should push very nicely if it's lubricated enough. Then you find your hole cut out and you put your pin back in using your pliers. Find the hole. It should slide into place. Make sure it's in the centre like that. And then place your clean gear. Make sure it sits in the back of this groove. You have to make sure your pin sits evenly in this groove and is sitting flat. You'll feel it if you hold it with your finger and then spin it round. It should spin round with some force, or you can feel the resistance with your finger. This is the front diff, so we're going to use 5000 silicone in this. So what you do is you fill the diff up so it's about halfway full. Another point to remember is make sure you put this little set screw back in, because you can see what's happening, the diff oil's running out. Just push that so the screw is flush, not too far in, because it'll touch the gears from the inside otherwise. So once that's in, I'd fill it up just a little bit more than that, just a little bit above halfway, and that's all you'll need, because if you put too much in, you will hydraulic lock the diff and it will blow the oil out or cause some damage to your diff. So making sure that you've got both your washers either side. This keeps a good pinch on the diff gears so there's no movement. And then place your gear in the top. Make sure it spins nicely round, which it will do. Then you're ready to grease your other diff cup. So put some grease around that. And again, I've got the O-ring out at the moment. Push it in that way, the opposite way, just spin it around a bit. You can see it's nicely flowed the grease on there, and then spin it around the other way, and you can see there's a good coating of grease in the groove of the drive cup. So place your bearing, which is here. I just push it on like that, it should just nicely fit. Put your drive shaft through, get your O-ring, push back on, your pin, use your pliers. Careful you don't catch the O-ring and chip it out. Make sure it's in the centre. Then you can see that there's a straight line where your pin goes. So if you line that up with your 4 holes the same, it'll be easier to fit. So you just turn around, straight round, putting your gasket on top, making sure it lines up with the holes, and just straight down on that, and it should fit. And that's gone down evenly. You want it to see that it's gone flat here. Then you need to line your holes up with your gasket. So using your small screwdriver, make sure that the holes are all lined up so you can see the threads. And then you get your screws, and using a screwdriver, just nip them up. They're all in. And the cheat screwdriver, making sure it's nice and flat. Get up near the end and go one either way, so that you tighten this one up, then across to that way, then across to this one, and then that one. Don't do that one, that one, and that one, that one, because otherwise you'll get an uneven, so that it could wobble like that. Then cross to the other side. You do it like this, otherwise you'll tighten one end tighter than the other. Then you go across to that one, and then across to the final one, and then once you've got that like that, just gently tighten each one until they feel tight, and then check that you get a nice rotation of the diff, and then put your shim back on the gear side so that it goes to the gearbox, so it will push this way, and then you'll get a nice mesh with your pinion gear and your gearbox gear. So we are ready to put the diff back in. Just before you put the diff back in, apply some grease, same grease as you used in the diff cup, and that's ready to go back in. You'll notice there's a cutout in the bottom of the chassis, and this is where the gear will sit so that you get it around the right way. Make sure the drive shafts go in the drive cups first and the other drive cup goes in. Make sure the little shim sits in there nicely in here. So then you put your gearbox case cover back on. That slides in nicely in the grooves in the gearbox. That fits in. Your countersunk screws, this screw here with a countersunk in the top there. And you will need your suspension pins. So it's your suspension plate and your 2 pins ready to go in, and not countersunk but the rounded ones go in to the suspension plate. So you put your plate on, lay that in place, then you should be able to push both pins through to the wishbones, and make sure they're lined up with the back plate, which is a similar plate. It'll go all the way through. It's plastic at the rear. Make sure it's all the way through, and then you need to line these screws up with the holes in the gearbox on the camera angle. So you can see the screws are in there now, and I will do them up with the cheap screwdriver just till they get, and then I will do them up with the screwdriver so a bit tight. Same with the top gearbox ones, just do them up till they get near the end. Just carefully do them up with the screwdriver. Just hold that in the ball joint and you'll get snap on. And the same with the other one. Check that everyone's free rolling again, which it is, and it's time for your bumper to go on. So you've got the little screw still inside the bumper, push that in, it should slide in nicely, and the little hole go inside, make sure it's sitting flush, put the 2 screws from underneath, do them up. Again, when you're near, finish them off, do your screwdriver, do your bumper, just nip that up gently. It doesn't have to be super tight, just as long as the screw stays in there. Just put the cap screws on the front back onto your shot, the screw retains it, and you go in with the other one. That's all done.